So good evening, ladies and gentlemen, once again, and welcome to the summary and conclusion part of Firepower, Lessons from the Great War. Over the period 2015 to 2018, the Firepower Seminar Series produced 11 seminars, exploring 9 themes within the evolution of artillery and firepower during the Great War. Command and control, human stories, both commanders and gunners, artillery tactics, the pursuit of technology both through ammunition systems and the gunnery problem, combined arms and the advent of modern warfare, force generation and sustainment, and other gunners, the viewpoint of our allies and adversaries. Across these 11 seminars, Firepower presented 41 papers from 29 authors and a mix of practitioner, academic and historian from both Australian and counterpart perspectives. These recounted the developments in artillery and firepower across the war and revealed lessons to be learned and innovation and adaptation that remains pertinent to this day. My summation this evening will not attempt to recount all the material presented in the series, but rather to synthesise the key developments in the employment of Australian artillery and its counterparts in firepower throughout World War I, as revealed through the series papers. The Dardanelles campaign witnessed Australia's first wholesale involvement in industrial-era warfare and all its lethality, complexity and consumption, unmatched in its scale and national commitment. Cramped, hilly terrain and difficult logistics, including a lack of high-level, high-explosive shells, exacerbated the paucity of artillery support available to the Anzacs from both Australian and British guns. British Indian mountain batteries assisted, while high-velocity, low-angle naval guns and 18-pounders were frequently impeded by intermediate crests and unable to engage targets effectively. Intercommunication between observer, commander and gun position was poor. Initial use of air observation occurred, but no direct communications or imagery resulted in the slow transfer of artillery-related intelligence. By contrast, the tenets of mobile warfare were retained in the Palestine campaign, as the theatre's terrain and scale afforded manoeuvre the advantage. However, austere lines of logistics and supply for both sides saw relatively low intensities of artillery expenditure predominate. While no Australian artillery deployed, British guns supported Australian light horse and other desert-mounted corps formations in direct and indirect fire roles, in a fluid mix of rapid advances and then the reduction of the Ottoman Empire's defended positions. The campaign's tempo and lower strategic priority moderated the adoption of contemporary artillery technological and tactical evolutions occurring on the Western Front, such as counter-battery techniques and the pursuit of predicted, or that is calculated rather than adjusted, artillery fire. On its arrival on the Western Front in 1916, the Australian Imperial Force and its supporting Australian Field Artillery was confronted by a campaign where defence had a considerable advantage over the attack and where manoeuvre had given way to static positions and unprecedented attrition. Each of the warring forces strove to resolve this lethal manifestation of the modern gunnery problem in stride, improving fixation and orientation of guns in a growing moonscape of featureless terrain with refinements in survey instrumentation and computation, addressing calibration of guns through accounting for variance in barrel wear, projectile size and weight, and propellant composition and handling, inception of the novel field of enemy weapon locating, and rapid advancements in recording and applying meteorological corrections to gunnery calculations. The inception of registration missions providing correction of the moment allowed the usage of accurate predicted fire and later were used to support surprise attacks when conducted at a distance from the assault area or otherwise disguised. Communications developments saw wire telegraphy gradually replaced by wireless radio, permitting immediate and relatively reliable linkage between forward and aerial observers and the gun lines. Together, these advancements allowed more flexible application of artillery in support of manoeuvre arms, greater concentration of fire, and heightened responsiveness and reliability of fire. The employment of anti-aircraft artillery spread rapidly as the war progressed. Heavy and light machine guns and field artillery were originally repurposed, but were soon replaced by purpose-built quick-fire guns such as the 3-inch and the 1-pounder pom-pom. Immense mathematical and physics challenges in target acquisition, range finding, and airburst fuse setting were rapidly confronted. Though initially not coordinated beyond local defence, both Allied and German anti-aircraft artillery nevertheless accounted for many hundreds of aircraft kills, including, most famously, the Red Baron by a 53rd Battery AFA gunner. While aerial observation from balloons had occurred for decades, the advent of fixed-wing flight and improvements in aerial photography permitted huge advances in the speed of intelligence dissemination and application, including, for artillery, predicted fire for both assault and defence. Gridded photo maps shared aloft and at the gun line now permitted rapid target indication and engagement. Airborne wireless radio, introduced in the final months of 1917, employed notably later in mid-1918 at Le Hamel, permitted real-time artillery adjustment to barrages. Aerial reconnaissance also added significantly to the nascent function of artillery intelligence and the development of counter-battery fire techniques. In the absence of weapon locating radar, effective sound ranging and flash spotting techniques were developed on both sides, each striving to locate, engage and destroy the adversary's guns. Heavy calibre, long-range guns were increasingly dedicated to counter-battery work, while lighter calibre guns would be employed to both deceive and provoke an enemy response, at the risk of unmasking their gun positions in the face of a still heavier retaliatory ambush. The Western Front marked the height of complexity and scale in deliberate artillery fire plan construction. Allied and German field defences were part of concentrated fortification systems that were heavily protected and linear as well as deep. The impregnability and lethality of such targets necessitated comprehensive and meticulous artillery support that could simultaneously blind, suppress, illuminate, neutralise and destroy our targets across uneven, narrow and congested frontages. Assault fire plans evolved from simple fixed arrangements into creeping barrages that moved in front of advancing troops, standing barrages that neutralised whole enemy trench lines, and lifting barrages, which were standing barrages that moved wholly to subsequent objectives and cut-offs. Defensive fire plans included predicted fire SOS missions that engaged likely enemy approaches. Box barrages were fired additionally around advancing troops on new won objectives to defeat enemy attempts at counter-penetration, and we heard Adam's recounting of that at Montbretagne. Other standard AFA field fire missions included registration, as we've heard of before, as well as search and sweep missions that were employed across areas to harass forward troops or to unmask enemy guns, while heavier calibre howitzers conducted harassment and interdiction missions against depth targets using predicted fire generated from aerial reconnaissance. And we heard from Jason in the way that Coxon was employing those very techniques. The increasing complexity of artillery tactics and functions during the campaign led to commensurate augmentation of the staff of divisional level commanders Royal Artillery. Similarly, the growing incidence of corps level artillery fire planning in support of corps and higher level operations saw the creation of corps level CRAs across British and Dominion forces, including the first Australian artillery commander of the newly formed Australian Corps in November 1917, as we've just heard, General Coxon. Artillery command and control, that is, the allocation of firepower assets at all levels, evolved to permit the centralised command of guns with the decentralisation of control to more flexibly guarantee fire support along the front. By 1918, rapid improvements in communications, fixation, orientation and ballistic correction had facilitated the development of artillery support tasking that unleashed an unprecedented capacity for artillery to switch and move fires across the front in concert with manoeuvre. Despite the immense efforts given to perfection artillery indirect fire, however, artillery in direct fire roles were still used by both sides throughout the war and at times was essential for the reduction and destruction of obstacles in the attack, such as in 1916 by 6th Battery AFA at Pozières, or later in the defence as prototype anti-tank guns, as successfully employed by German defenders at Bullecourt in 1917 and Le Hamel in 1918. Both HE and shrapnel shells were employed in such direct fire engagements against wire targets, the latter being effective in direct fire where the fuse could be set accurately. Artillery technology and materiel development finally matched the rate of the evolution of artillery tactics in the final months of the war, although communication difficulties were never fully realised. The Australian Corps' advance during the Amiens offensive in August 1918 witnessed a transition from static back to mobile warfare, as we've just heard, with artillery units stepping up behind advancing infantry and the precursor to modern-day quick-fire plans formulated to respond to rapidly unfolding battles. From its modest beginnings in 1915, the growth of Australian artillery formations and units on the Western Front was relentless. By 1918, the strength of deployable Australian artillery had swelled from a pre-war permanent RAA strength of 1 battery and Carter staffs to the Australian Corps employing a total of up to 1,200 guns, including 13 field artillery brigades, 2 heavy siege batteries, 5 divisional ammunition columns, and numerous medium and heavy trench mortar companies. In this time, Australian artillery had grown equally in maturity and professionalism. In the crucible of this terrible conflict had been forged indelible principles of artillery employment relating to command and control, artillery intelligence, air-land integration, combined arms manoeuvre, and ammunition, the weapon of artillery. And these principles endure to the modern day. Thank you.